Baby, here I go, start the show. Beat on my heart now, about to explode. I'm about to explode. Feel good, what I'm feeling.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Ignite Your True Self. I'm Ericka Sallee, your host for this show. And for those of you who may be joining for the first time, let me take this opportunity to welcome you to Ignite Your True Self. You know, I get excited about sharing each and every week because it's always important for us to figure out, like, what is it that's going to help us move to that next level? And sometimes we just need a little teeny bit of a spark to help us keep moving forward to create the best version of ourselves, which in essence is our true self, or connected to our true synergy, which is mental, physical, spiritual well-being, mind, body, and spirit, personally and professionally. And so as I say that, I realize that some of you may be coming into the conversation and perhaps you have not been here before and you don't know anything about who I am. So let me take this opportunity to just quickly introduce myself as a speaker, a self-help author, and transformation success coach. I help women and organizations to figure out what stands in the way of you achieving that next best version of yourself. And the best part about that is that I get to share strategies to help you move those barriers out the way, jump over them, skip over them, knock them down so that you can keep moving forward. Because I do believe that there is something special on the inside of each and every one of us that the world is waiting for. And whenever we hold on to that or we hide it, then guess what? That means that the world is not getting the benefit of what you have to offer, and perhaps using those gifts as things to change the world that we live in. And dare I say that we absolutely need as much change as we can possibly find. So for those of you who are coming in live, good evening, Vernette. Happy Thursday. I like to call it Friday Eve. So glad that you are able to join me live. And for those of you who will come in later to see the show, I do want you to hashtag replay to let me know that you had an opportunity to come and hang out with me. I do want to remind you that yes, indeed, today is April the 20th, which means that we are 3 weeks into Black Women's History Month. And before I get into the topic for tonight's show, I do want to highlight the fact that Black women are continuing to make history in every field, every facet, whether it's technology, whether it's science, whether it's entertainment, whether it's an agent for a particular sports figure. We are just doing so many amazing things. And so, you know, we celebrated Black History Month in February. We celebrated Women's History Month in March. And so now we get to spotlight Black women in history. And so every week in the month, I have been highlighting a particular figure that I wanted to make sure that you know about. Tonight, I'm going to do something a little bit different. And that is to think about this idea that we have as women in general, but in particular, Black women, to wear what I like to call the cape, right? There's so many things that I know are vying for our attention. And for Black women, when we are in the various fields that we occupy, there's a couple things that we are focused on. Number one, that we are women. And number two, being Black women. And the idea is that, oh my gosh, we cannot fail. We cannot fail. We cannot make a mistake. We always have to be on point. We can never fall short. And that concept, I understand where it comes from because we're already being looked at in a certain kind of way and with some limitations in other people's eyes, right? And so we want to make sure that we always put our best foot forward. We want to make sure that we never stumble, that we never show our vulnerable side, or that we can't show our powerful side. Because there are certain things that are attached to us when we are powerful, when we stand strong in what we believe in. And so we have a tendency to kind of put ourselves in a space where we have to always be on point. And so what I want to say in this conversation, and there's probably so many more things that I can say in this space, but here's what I will just mention really quickly. And that is, as women, as Black women, yes, there is pressure for us to be perfect. There is pressure for us to make sure that we don't make a mistake, that we don't fall short. But here's the reality. The reality is that we are human beings. And so we have to remember that we need to put that cape aside. Now, what is the cape? The cape is always rushing in to be the superhero, always rushing in to be the one that people come to for support, for guidance, for direction. And we're lifting people up all the time. And meanwhile, when we do that on a consistent basis without taking the time to take care of ourselves, then we wear ourselves down. So it is Black Women's History Month. And I want to remind us that it is important to recognize that we can't be all things to all people all the time. Let me say that again. We cannot be all things to all people all the time. Okay. We have to replenish ourselves. We have to nurture ourselves. And if you've been in any kind of conversation with me before, you know that self-care is absolutely paramount. And well-being, taking care of ourselves, is really what opens the door for us to be able to move into that transformation space, to move into seeking out what that best version or that true self is for you. So, as a Black woman sharing in this month of Black Women's History Month, do remember to take the time out, number one, to nurture yourself, to take care of yourself. Number two is to recognize that I know history tells us that, oh gosh, we can't fall short, we can't make a mistake. But the reality of it is, when we show up as our whole selves, there are going to be times when we may not get it right. And we have to understand how okay that is, and how to transition into a mindset that says, you know what, sometimes it's not going to work out. Sometimes I may fall short. I may have to go back and do something again, not because I'm not intelligent enough, but it's just because human nature sometimes dictates that that's the way life goes. So on that note, Black Women's History Month, remember to always, always put time aside to take care of you. Now, I had my office window open and I realized that my neighbor's cutting grass. So I'm a little bit warm, but I didn't want the lawnmower to be a distraction. So I'm going to have to fan or wait for a minute when they're done and open up this window. But for now, we're going to keep it moving. So let me get into the topic for tonight. Before I do, I also want to remind you that if you're watching, to use the hashtag Ignite Your True Self, so that you let your community know what you are up to. If there's something that I say that resonates with you, then by all means, type a comment, put that in whatever social media space you happen to be watching the show, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and then use the hashtag Ignite Your True Self. And True Self is TRUSELF. So I wanted to make sure that I clarify that. And then let's go ahead and get into this topic. So tonight, the topic is why you keep procrastinating. All right. So I'm just going to let that sit there for a minute. Why you keep procrastinating. So when I was preparing for tonight's conversation, I started thinking about making a distinction between procrastinating and sitting and waiting. All right. Procrastinating and sitting and waiting. So let me explain the sitting and waiting part. And this is my own personal story. Over the last few months, I've been trying to process the things that are going on in my space. So as a business owner, it does make sense to reassess, to recalculate, to go back and look at your mission and your goals and figure out, okay, do I need to realign something? Is this working? What's working here? What's not working? And how do I need to adjust? And so over the last few months, I've kind of been in this place of stillness, if you will. On the one hand, there is a lot going on with a major project that's coming out later this year. And so I've been focusing my attention on that, but feeling like in some other areas that there have just been some moments of, okay, this is not moving. And so what does this mean? Okay. So when I say procrastination, And when I talk about stillness and waiting, the period that I'm talking about has been a stillness and waiting kind of situation. So literally on yesterday, and I had been, making some changes, putting some things in place, but literally yesterday. So here in my office, I have a whiteboard and I had some things up on the whiteboard, and that's kind of where I was driving and moving toward. So yesterday I stood in front of the whiteboard and I just wiped everything off. And I said, okay, let me just go from a clean slate and just outline what true synergy is and all of that. Because from the beginning of the year to now, I felt like, ooh, there's some kind of pause here. And what is that? So when I talk about procrastination, it's not that. And I wanted to explain it because you might be in a situation where you're like, okay, I'm trying to figure something out and I just need to be still. I just need to be quiet. I need to be prayerful. I need to be intentional. And I just need to sit with some things for a minute. So put that to the side and say, okay, in a moment like that, I think we all have to go through that period sometimes where we say, okay, here's where I am in my life and my journey, whether it's your career or your relationships, and I just need to figure out what's next. Okay. That to me is a healthy way to process the where am I now and then where do I want to go. Procrastination is almost the opposite of that, where you say, all right, I know what I need to do, but you're not doing it. Okay. The stillness and waiting is I'm not really sure. And so I want to sit with it for a minute and I want to be prayerful about it so that I know what direction to go in. So you see the distinction there. Okay. So tonight we're talking about why you keep procrastinating, why there's something that you know that you need to do, something that you have been planning to do, something you've been contemplating, but you're not doing it. Okay. So go with me on this journey. And I want to share three reasons why you might be procrastinating. But before I do that, I want you to ask yourself this question, or I want you to answer this question as I ask. And that is, what is it right now in my space that I've been knowing that I need to do it? I've been thinking about it. I've been talking about it. I've been praying about it. I've written it down. I think about it all the time and I'm talking to people about it, but I'm just not doing it. So if you know that that's a conversation that you're having right now, maybe all week long, all last week, all month, you're like, I really know that I need to do this, then is that you? Can you just type it in the comments and say, yep, that's me. Been there, done that. I'm there right now. Because I think we all have those moments that creep up for us and we know it. It's like, I know I need to do this, but I'm putting it off. And I keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. So here are a couple reasons why you might be doing that. And the reality of it is, you say, okay, well, so this is about igniting your true self. This is about, creating that flame that's going to allow me to move forward and be that best version. Well, here's the reality. If you are procrastinating, that is a huge barrier to you moving into whatever next is. So it becomes a problem when we constantly procrastinate because then we stay stagnant. And then we look back and we often feel some sense of regret, like, oh my gosh, I knew I wanted to do this. I've been talking about it, but I just haven't done it, right? So thank you for acknowledging, yes, that's me. I think we all can identify with that. So let me give you the reasons why we procrastinate. And then I'm going to share 3 tips on how to move those reasons into something actionable for yourself, okay? So the first reason we procrastinate is that we're just sheer being lazy, okay? Just being lazy. Being lazy, like, oh, just kicking back, like, okay, I know I need to do it, but I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to just let time pass and I'm not going to do anything about it. I know it's in my mind. I've been thinking about it. I've been talking about it, but okay, I'm just going to sit and, okay, just being lazy. Okay, that's the first reason. Second reason is oftentimes we are fearful, right? We're fearful and maybe we're just like, oh, I don't know if I should do that. Or am I really qualified to do that? Ooh, do I have enough skill? Do I have enough this? Oh my gosh. So you're talking yourself out of moving forward because you're afraid. And it might be, I'm afraid of what they're going to say. I'm afraid of what they're going to think. They're going to look at me and say, how dare she or how dare he? And then you just say, okay, let me just keep putting it off because we're so busy trying to figure out what other people are going to say or think about what it is that we're doing. And so we just say, oh, okay. So let me just keep putting it off. The third reason why we procrastinate, and this is something that I know to be true. I know I've had this experience myself. I've talked with many of my clients who also feel the same way. And that is if you are looking at something that you want to get done, you might be looking at it and you say, oh gosh, this thing is so big. Like every time I sit down and think about it, because it's so big, because it's so much, there's so many parts, there's so many things to do. And then I start thinking about it and just the idea of how much is involved or, how big it is, it makes us say, you know what, I'm not even gonna bother. I'm just not even gonna bother. Here's an example. So I have a room downstairs in my basement. You walk down the steps, you go to the left, and there's a storage room. And I think I may have shared this story before. I'm not sure if it was here in this space on the show, but every time I would go into that room, this is probably maybe around 2020. Was it during COVID? I'm not even sure. But when you would walk into the room, you literally could open up the door, but you couldn't move around because there was so much stuff in that room. And every time I would go in there, I would just go in there with the idea of, I know I need to clean this out. I know I need to get rid of some of this stuff, but oh my gosh, where do I even start? It's just too many things, okay? So when something feels big and something feels like, yes, overwhelming, thank you for sharing that, then we sometimes say, okay, I can't even do it. So let me share 3 tips on how to move from that place of putting things off to, let me just go ahead and start getting some stuff done. So here's the first thing. Remember when I said one of the reasons why we procrastinate is because we're just being lazy. We're just like, I'm just gonna sit here and I know it needs to get done, but maybe if I twinkle my nose like Bewitched or if I blink my eyes real fast, then it's gonna get done, okay? So what if I said to you, instead of that, why not reallocate your lazy hours? I remember being in college, and I think it was like after 10 or 11 o'clock, we would have quiet hours. And I'm not sure why that came to mind when I was writing this, like lazy hours, somehow my brain went to quiet hours. But so reallocate your lazy hours. So you might say, well, what does that mean? So let's say, for instance, if you know that there is something that you need to get done, something that's vying for your attention and you need to take care of it. And instead of taking care of it, you've been like sitting on the couch, you've been watching TV, you've been twirling your fingers, twirling your hair, talking on the phone, looking at social media. What if you said, okay, how much time am I actually spending procrastinating? If I've been sitting on the couch for 1 hour, or if I've been picking up the phone, scrolling through social media, and let me tell you, that has been one of my things. Like literally, sometimes I'll pick up the phone and I start scrolling, and then I might post something, and then, the feed comes through and you're kind of looking at what's going on in the world, and you're like, wait a minute, okay. So if you said to yourself, all right, if I know that one of my procrastination mechanisms is to go to social media or to sit still, and knowing that that stuff is waiting for me, and you know that, okay, I'll do that for an hour. What if you reallocated those lazy hours and you took that 1 hour and you shifted it to going to clean out your closet? Or you shifted it to, okay, I know I got to write these bills out. So let me just go ahead, reallocate this time. Let me spend 1 hour doing the thing. So essentially what you're doing is you are re-triggering or realigning your time and you're moving it from, I know I'm being lazy. I know I've been sitting here for 20 minutes. So let me move and do this. And even if you, there's two ways to look at it. You can say, I'm going to spend equal amounts of time. So if I know I've been sitting here for 20 minutes and I've been just passing time and not want to do it, let me take that same 20 minutes and put it into this thing right here. Over the weekend, I have 2 drawers upstairs in my closet. Now, I love jewelry. I love all different kinds of jewelry. The more odd it looks, the more I like it. So I have 2 drawers that are filled with jewelry. Now, most of the jewelry was in its own separate bag, and I try to color code, but let me just be honest, over probably the last year, things are in bags that don't match and all this kind of stuff. So every time I would pull that drawer out, I'm like, oh gosh, to the point where one of the drawers is sort of like caving in because there's so much in there. So I had to like take all the stuff out of all the both of the drawers. And I was like, I was procrastinating because I didn't want to do it. I got up, I think it was Sunday morning, and I opened the drawer and I said, okay, you cannot allow this to sit like this anymore because something is going to fall in the wrong direction and it's going to be a mess. So I pulled both of the drawers out and I literally sat, dumped everything out, repackaged the things, got rid of some stuff. I got a pile that's ready to go to Goodwill. So I have been putting that off. And I knew that I needed to do it. So I just had to take the 30 to 45 minutes that I was getting ready to sit in the bathtub and just have my quiet time. And I was like, okay, let me shift and let me do this because I know it has to be done. So when you reallocate your lazy hours, you're essentially saying, I'm going to utilize the same time that I would use so that I can get this thing done. Okay. So that's the first tip. I talk to myself and say, get up and get this done. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because here's tip number 2. So remember when I said, okay, sometimes we procrastinate because we're fearful or we're waiting for everything to be right. You're like, I can't do this yet because I got to do this, and this. So what if you said to yourself, okay, let me just think about what's on the other side of procrastination. So Vernette says, okay, I talk to myself and I say, I got to get this done. So that kind of goes hand in hand with this tip is that if you sit and you ask yourself, okay, on the other side of me procrastinating, what is the benefit? What is the thing that I'm going to get out of this? Or how is this going to make me better? Or how is this going to change my situation? How is this going to make my life better? How is this going to improve my career? So like when you start thinking about, well, if I'm procrastinating and I'm just sitting back and I'm not doing this thing, what happens on the other side if I do it? Because here's the thing, most of the time, and I'm going to go on a limb and say most of the time, when we procrastinate, there's something that we're saying to ourselves, like in that procrastination state, there's something that we're not satisfied with. Okay. Just like I told you about my 2 drawers upstairs in my closet. I wasn't satisfied with the fact that they were overflowing and one was buckling. And I knew that there was jewelry in there that I probably hadn't worn in years. And so, why not get rid of it? Or one earring is here, the other one, I have no idea where. So that needs to go in the trash. So like, there's something that in that procrastination state that we're saying, ooh, if this were different, then this would be better. If I just took this step, then it would improve my chances to do X. Like there's something that you say to yourself, I'm procrastinating with this, but if I go ahead and do it, then what is it going to look like for me when I get it done? So when you ask yourself that question and you really start to get into that state of being in the space of, oh gosh, When this closet is clean, I'll be able to walk in, I'll be able to turn around, I'll be able to put stuff away in nice, neat places. Oh my gosh. On the other side of this procrastination, that means that I will have completed a project. Oh my gosh, I've been procrastinating. I've been wanting to write this book. I've been wanting to tell this story. And on the other side of that, oh my gosh, I feel accomplished, or my writing will help somebody else. On the other side of the procrastination, there's something better than whatever it is that you're sitting in that's causing you not to move. Okay. So the second tip is to really say, oh, well, when this is done, then how am I going to feel? What is it going to look like? How am I going to respond to myself, or how are other people going to respond to me when I do this thing? Okay. So that's the second tip. And then the third tip to move beyond procrastination. Remember when I said sometimes we stop because it's too big, because it can feel overwhelming. And that's very common. It's very common because it'd be nice if everything that we wanted to do was simple. The reality of it is there's lots of things that just are not. And so tip number 3 says to break the task into smaller, manageable chunks. Okay. Break the task into smaller, manageable chunks. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Go back to when I talked about the room that's downstairs in my basement. I knew that I couldn't walk into that closet and again, be like Bewitched, and I might be dating myself, but when I was younger, Bewitched was one of my favorite TV shows. You could not tell me that I wasn't going to twinkle my nose and something magical wasn't going to happen. But anyway, I wasn't going to walk into that closet and twinkle my nose like that and everything be clean. So I had to break it down into smaller chunks. And when I tell you, walking into that room, it was overwhelming. And every time I walk in there and I see all this stuff, I would look and I'm like, I know I need to clean this out. And I would turn right back around. I had, and this is still down there now, but it's cleaner. My daughter's costumes, 11 years of dancing. There's Christmas decorations. There's luggage, like all the things. So I had to break that down and say, okay, on this day, you're going to go and grab this box and you're going to shred it. Now, when I say this box and shred it, what I'm talking about is probably 15 to 20 plus years of bank statements and old checks. Okay. Now, I don't know why I felt the need to keep the checks. Maybe it's because I thought, well, is there one in here that I didn't cash? Okay. But I had to think about, let me do this on this day. And then I had to go back and think about, okay, this is what I'm going to tackle next. So when you think about procrastination, it's because we do feel overwhelmed. We do feel like it's too much to think about at one time. So if breaking it down helps you to say, okay, if I do this little bit on this day, and this little bit on this day, and this little bit on this day, then I'm chunking away at the thing that feels overwhelming to me. And each time you chunk it down and you get something done, then you're essentially saying, okay, wait a minute. I got that done. So let me move on to the next thing. And you find yourself in this rhythm. Because once I started flowing in that room down there, I was like, oh, I can actually see progress. And I can actually go into the room and I can move around as opposed to like, just putting one foot in front of the other and hoping something wouldn't fall down on me. So break the thing down into smaller chunks. I have a group of ladies that I'm coaching through a women's network. And one of the women has talked about, like starting her own business and knowing that there's lots of components with that. That can be overwhelming because you're like, oh gosh, how do I do this? What are the things I need to do? And so writing the list of things, right? Researching your name, making sure you file your articles, putting website together, identifying your mission and your vision, like all of those things. So listing those things out, and that can feel overwhelming because you're like, oh gosh, I don't know where to start. What are all the pieces? It's so much, it's complicated. What should I be? All of the things. So when you start listing those things out and you're like, I'm going to just chunk this out and I'm going to just break this down into smaller pieces so that I can get one thing done. And when I get that done, then I can move on to the next. Or I may figure that, okay, once I get into a rhythm of doing this thing, then I can move into something else as this one is finishing. So there's a couple different ways to approach that. But when we break the task down into smaller, manageable chunks, then it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And then it reduces our tendency to want to procrastinate because you're like, oh, I'm feeling pretty good about the progress I'm making. Oh, I see the progress that I'm making. Oh my goodness, this is actually doable. So think about it from that perspective. So I'm going to go back through the 3 tips again. And again, this conversation is, why do we keep procrastinating? We're procrastinating because we might be feeling lazy. We might be feeling fearful. We're like, oh my gosh, can I do this? How is this going to work? I'm not sure. I don't know. All of the things that come along. So we keep pushing it off. And then the other piece of it is, sometimes we do feel overwhelmed. So really quickly, the first tip is to reallocate your lazy hours. That is, for every minute that you spend putting the thing off, reallocate that time and say, you know what, I'm going to spend that 20 minutes. I'm going to go in there and clean that closet out. I'm going to spend that 20 minutes to sit down and write one chapter. I'm going to spend that 20 minutes to research this business because I've really been wanting to do this, but I've been putting it off. So reallocate your lazy hours. The second tip is to think about, well, what's on the other side of that procrastination? If I were to get this done, how would I feel? Is it going to put me in a better position to be healthier? Right? You know how it is, the beginning of the year, we're making resolutions. And I talked about that in the very first show this year. It's like, okay, let's make resolutions as opposed to goals. If you didn't see that show, I encourage you to go back and check that out. You can do that on my YouTube channel. All you have to do is go up to the live button and you can go back and scroll through all the shows. But think about what's on the other side of that procrastination. Oh my gosh, if I stop procrastinating about working out and taking care of myself, well, what's on the other side? It is a healthier version of me. It is a version of me that has more stamina, more energy, perhaps lower blood pressure, perhaps my A1C levels are where they need to be, like all the things. What would happen on the other side of me knowing what it is that I need to do and I haven't done it? But on the other side of it is the better version of, whether it's you personally or professionally or a combination of the two. All right. And then lastly, the third tip is to break that thing down into smaller, manageable chunks. It reduces that overwhelm when we're taking small steps. And I say this all the time when it comes to transformation. A lot of times we're trying to change something major about ourselves that has been a part of our history for a good portion of our lives. And we look up and we say, oh gosh, that's too much. That's too big. I can't do it. Why? I don't know when to start. I don't know how to start. And you keep putting it off and putting it off because you're like, I got too many things that I need to do, that I need to work on. Well, when you break it down, then it makes those little baby steps that much easier and you can see progress. And then once you start, you're like, okay, I'm on a roll. I may as well keep on going. All right. So on that note, as we begin to wrap up the conversation for tonight, I do want to encourage you that if you are sitting there and you're watching, you're listening, and you have any questions about what's happening in your space, you say, okay, Ericka, I've heard you talk about why I keep procrastinating. I've heard the 3 tips, but I got some real specific things that pertain specifically to me. And I just want to find out what it is I'm supposed to do next, or how do I put all this together? So if that is what you're saying to yourself right now, then I do encourage you to reach out to me, and let's just set up a 45-minute discovery call, because it's an opportunity for you and I to have a conversation about what's happening in your space. And then we can have a discussion about, well, what does next look like for you? So you can go to the website, truesynergy.org. At the top of the page, there is an opportunity to click that little contact link, and then you can send me a contact and we will schedule that, or we'll get it set up. We'll get it set up. Say it slow. We'll get it set up. Discovery call. Okay. And listen, discovery call doesn't take anything except 30 to 45 minutes. All right. And it's really a conversation that says, you know what, I heard what you said. This is what's going on. So what do you suggest? And then we can talk about ways that I can support you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for showing what I need to do. I appreciate you being here. That means that it was intended for you to hear exactly what was shared on tonight. So thank you for joining. And then you can also follow my link tree to get to all of my other social media platforms. So you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube at Ericka Sallee. And then you can find me on Instagram at TrueSynergy_. And then finally, I did not put in here for tonight the conversation for next week. So just join me on next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right back here. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, on Facebook, please come back and be part of the conversation. Invite a friend to join us as well. And then if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, then I do encourage you to subscribe to my channel. Go ahead and share it out and then turn the notification bell on so that you are notified when new videos are uploaded. All right. So I am going to figure out which one of my topics I want to share for next week. The beauty is that I get to be flexible with it. So if I look at my schedule and I decide that I want to change it up, then I'm going to change it up, which is the reason why you're going to have to just come back next week and figure out what we're going to be talking about. So on that note, I look forward to seeing you all again real soon. But until I do, I want you to take care of yourselves and yes, be well. Good night.